Europe just turned on a system that tracks every single day you spend in the Schengen area. In its first 4 months, it has already flagged more than 4,000 overstayers. The entry-exit system, or EES, replaces the old passport stamp with fingerprints and facial scans, and it feeds directly into a new mechanism that can strip entire countries of visa-free access. If you hold a second passport, travel frequently to Europe, or rely on the 90 or 180-day rule, here is what you need to know. Every non-EU national entering the Schengen zone is being enrolled into a system that scans their fingerprints and face at the border. The system logs your entry, logs your exit, and automatically calculates how many of your 90 allowed days you have used within any rolling 180-day window. Before this, enforcement depended on border officers flipping through your passport and counting stamps by hand. The European Commission itself called that method unreliable. Now, a centralized database does it in real time. According to figures disclosed at a European Parliament briefing in February, the system has processed roughly 17 million travelers and logged 30 million border crossings. About 16,000 travelers were refused entry during that period, and a quarter of those refusals were linked to people flagged for overstaying. Full development is happening in phases. Border authorities started by registering about 10% of eligible travellers. That rose to 35% from January 9, 2026, and 50% from March 10th. The final milestone is April 10th, when passport stamps for short-stay visitors end entirely. On paper, the central infrastructure is stable. The EU agency responsible for it, EULISA, described the system-level rollout as fully operational. On the ground, the picture is messier. Paris Charles de Gaulle experienced delays from malfunctioning kiosks, software glitches, and understaffing. Lisbon Airport had to revert to manual stamping after biometric checks created severe congestion. Airport operators across Europe have warned that processing times could jump by as much as 70% where the system is active. Peak waits of 3 hours have been reported. If you are planning Schengen travel this year, budget extra time at the border, especially at major airports still working through the transition. Here is where the story gets bigger. The data the EES collects feeds directly into the EU's revised visa suspension mechanism, which entered into force in December 2025. Under the old rules, the EU could suspend a country's visa-free access if overstays from the nationality spiked by 50% or more. The new threshold is 30%, and before EES, measuring overstay rates with any precision was nearly impossible, because the data did not exist in digitized country-by-country form. The gap is now closed. Brussels has real-time, biometric-backed numbers on which nationalities overstay, how frequently, and for how long. The enforcement infrastructure and the data infrastructure are now connected. If you want to track how these policy shifts affect residency and citizenship programs worldwide, you can find, sort and compare more than 275 programs in 140 countries on IMI's Program Finder at imidaily.com. The revised visa suspension mechanism did not stop at overstay thresholds. It also introduced citizenship by investment, or CBI programs, as an independent ground for suspended visa-free access. The European Commission's latest report on the mechanism went further, stating that operating a CBI program constitutes grounds for suspension on its own. 5 Eastern Caribbean nations with active CBI programs, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia face the most direct exposure under this language. Georgia became the first country targeted under the revised mechanisms in March 2026. The Commission suspended visa-free travel for holders of Georgian diplomatic, service, and official passports. That action was based on democracy and human rights concerns rather than overstays. But it proved the new powers are operational and Brussels is willing to use them. For CBI jurisdictions, EES is just one piece of a larger enforcement architecture. ETIAS, the European Travel Information and Authorization System, is scheduled to launch in late 2026 and become mandatory by October 2027, where EES tracks who is inside the Schengen zone, ETIAS will screen who gets to enter in the first place. According to an IMI executive survey, 1/3 of investment migration professionals believe ETIAS will become a tool for discriminating against CBI passport holders. The concern is that European authorities could use algorithmic pre-travel screening to impose de facto restrictions on CBI-derived passports while formally preserving visa-free status on paper. Caribbean CBI nations implemented region-wide reforms in 2024. Mandatory interviews, enhanced due diligence, a unified regulatory authority. Whether those reforms satisfy Brussels is an open question. The Commission's language has hardened from urging reform to contemplating elimination. If you are navigating these changes and want professional guidance on residency or citizenship options, IMI has a directory of vetted specialists at imidaily.com. For individual travellers, getting caught by the EES carries real consequences. Fines vary by country. In France, the penalty is €198. Beyond fines, an overstay can create a record that affects future visa applications and Schengen entries. In more serious cases, authorities may issue removal orders or temporary entry bans, though those measures appear rare in early enforcement. Exceptions exist for circumstances beyond your control, such as serious illness, but the system is designed to flag overstays automatically. So you should not count on slipping through unnoticed the way you might have before. One important note: if you hold a long-stay visa or a residence permit in a Schengen country, you are not registered under EES. Your border experience may still be slower during the ramp-up, but the 90-180-day clock does not apply to you. The days of counting passport stamps are over. Europe's border enforcement just became digital, biometric, and automatic, and the data it produces has consequences well beyond individual travellers. If you want to understand the next layer of enforcement headed your way, check out the video on your screen now covering everything you need to know about ETIAS, Europe's upcoming pre-travel screening system that will decide who gets to board a plane before you even reach the border. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet.